maximizing education, power of media in terms of children's content. Who can possibly disagree with that sort of mission and goal? I'm very impressed, I must say, with your global international record and background. It is truly impressive and stunning. In Asia, Bangkok, Hong Kong, Singapore, in the United States, New York, Washington, Los Angeles, and most important of all, of course, is that he is serving on the CPD advisory board. And Gary, we're very pleased to have you here today, and we look forward to what looks like a truly terrific talk. So welcome.
Thanks. Thanks so much. I'm going to first introduce myself. I'm a CEO of an organization of about 350 people, and the only CEO in America who has to demonstrate the potty time Elmo in front of his board of directors and get paid to do it. So comes with the job. But I want to walk you through a little bit about Sesame Street as the longest street in the world, and what we've done to kind of transform our organization towards being a quintessential American educational organization that uses media into one that has truly gone now into over 140 countries around the world. And as I'll show you a few clips, we can't make this totally boring listening to me. We can't do justice to the work of my colleagues around the world without seeing a little of it. So unfortunately, Elmo is in Las Vegas today, so he couldn't make it over. But you'll have to put up with me with some clips. So we'll walk you through how Sesame Street is changing the world. The story of Sesame really starts in the 1960s, which was a time of turbulence in this country. It was a time of a controversial war, political assassinations, riots in our inner cities. In fact, I actually am an Angelino myself. I grew up here. I'm a product of K through 12 of the LA Unified School District. I remember probably maybe a couple blocks from this very location. There were stores burning in the 1960s over on Vermont Avenue, including one that my grandfather had. So this was a very near and dear neighborhood to me, and it was out of that era, I think, when there were a lot of people who were committed towards social change and social justice, felt that by bringing together resources from the public and private sectors, they could in fact change the world. It was a bit of a time of idealism. It was pre-Barack Obama. There was a war on poverty that President Johnson had started, and out of that came things like the Job Corps, Head Start, which didn't exist before that. There was no really child care program for those who couldn't afford it. NPR and PBS were invented around the same time. And Sesame Street was born at a dinner party in Manhattan, as New Yorkers like to think all important things are invented. And it was really a public affairs producer named Joan Gans Cooney and a foundation executive named Lloyd Morissette at this dinner who said, you know what, we know that kids are addicted to television, and we know that they are learning advertising jingles, and they're learning from all kinds of other shows on TV, like a show that some of you will remember, Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In. I can tell you more than one would remember that. And yet they're not being harnessed to really use this magnetic power to teach basic literacy and numeracy. So the idea was to create a show, and what they did is they put together a proposal which went to the Carnegie Corporation that is a brilliant proposal called The Potential Uses of Television in Preschool Education. That was written by Joan Gans Cooney, and we actually have it on a website. And I would urge any of you interested in the topics of media and education to read this thing. It won't take you very long, because it's the most simple, straightforward funding proposal you will have ever read. It's just hits it right on, here's what the preschoolers world is, here's the television world, here's how we connect the dots, give us money. And in fact, Carnegie did that, and they funded what became an experiment where they brought together educators from Harvard Graduate School of Education, who knew nothing about television, and a bunch of television producers who knew nothing about education, and then there was a long-haired guy with a beard, not to pick on long-haired guys with beards, there was a long-haired guy with a beard who they thought was a member of the Weather Underground, who turned out to be Jim Henson. Nobody knew who this guy was. And he had these socks, green socks, that became Kermit the Frog. And they all got thrown into a room, and they locked the door and said, come out with something brilliant. And in fact, what was invented was Sesame Street, which has now gone on to be the most awarded program in the history of television. And I want to show you a couple of clips about what went on in the early days.
Introducing a new television series for children. Look right in here, Bruce. Man, you're in there. Look a little closer.
So of course that was Johnny Cash, who was one of the first celebrities to be on the show. James Earl Jones was actually the first, if you're ever on Jeopardy, and that becomes the question. He did in his own Shakespearean prose the alphabet that he recited from A to Z. The point of bringing on the celebrities, of course, was to try to build some kind of a loyalty with parents, because the belief was that co-viewing would have a deeper educational impact if parents were in fact reinforcing the lessons that were placed on the show. And of course that has proven to be correct. How we get out of it. Okay. So Sesame Street has now, over its 39-year history, believe it or not, probably been more research than certainly been more research than any television show, in more master's theses, more doctoral dissertations, numerous studies, very famous one out of the University of Kansas at the Ed School there, which studied longitudinally kids who started in preschool and tracked them all the way through high school. Those who were regular viewers of the show, academically superior to those who were not. And we've done a lot of work around diversity. You have to remember that when Sesame Street was invented, it broke the rules of many shows in television. It was an integrated cast of the first Hispanic couple, really, in America, Luis and Maria. It might be, I like to call it sort of now, it's the world's longest telenovela in a way, by tracing them through time. African Americans, Asian Americans, green grouches, and big tall yellow canaries all living together. The show was actually banned in the state of Mississippi the first year, not allowed to be shown because of the integrated neighborhood being projected in a positive light. So that seems ridiculous to us today, but it wasn't so long ago when we were living in a country that those sorts of things were promoted. So Sesame Street sort of broke that barrier and showed in a way which was not didactic, and it was not done in a way that was simply like a school marm lecturing to kids, but took television to a whole nother level by using the techniques of entertainment to engage kids around educational programs. And of course, as I was saying, we now broke the record. We outdid the wide world of sports. We broke the record and now have 117 Emmys, more Emmys than any show in the history of television. And you can see all these other awards, which are probably too numerous to mention. We're still waiting for the USC award. The secret behind the sauce here is really building a model where we take education very, very seriously. We are a 501c3 nonprofit organization chartered under the Board of Regents of the University of State of New York. And therefore, we have what I'll call maybe the luxury in quotes. As we go into new programmatic activity, we look at the needs of children first and foremost. So whether it's about teaching basic literacy and numeracy, or whether it's about teaching health and hygiene concepts or diversity issues, we will look and assess the needs in this country or other countries that we work in. Often then bring in a set of educational advisors, since we are not expert in these specific topical areas, who then help us set educational objectives. We bring in brilliant writers who are not on strike, by the way, even though they are WGA, who come in and somehow are able to craft engaging, funny, musical, Muppet-like programs around these sometimes very difficult to teach educational objectives, and create engaging programming that way that we need to fulfill through distribution outlets, which used to be just PBS, because that was the one channel which stood separately from the free commercial networks. And now, of course, as you all know, we live in a world not simply of 500 cable channels, but we live in a world of tens of thousands of websites which compete for children's time today. So just by way of example, Sesame Street was one of only 2 preschool shows as late as 1989. Today there are 47 on television this morning in Los Angeles, and 6 competing networks. So we're really having to keep up with the moving cheese, which they teach about in business school. And then it all comes around to doing a summative evaluation, so we make sure that children are in fact taking away the lessons that they were intended to learn. We did a show on divorce once, where Snuffleupagus' parents get into an argument and they get divorced. We were trying to, of course, deal with the fact that there are many families in those situations. And of course, when we tested with the kids said, oh, that means every time my parents get into an argument, they're going to get divorced. We said, nah, that's not really what we intend. So the show is never seen on TV, although it's probably on YouTube or something. Anyway, we move forward. Sesame is the only show produced every year for kids still. We're doing 26 hours domestically a year still. And we focus on, which is unique for children's programming, the whole childhood, dealing with cognitive learning, dealing with social and emotional learning, and physical well-being, and programs like Healthy Habits for Life, which I'll show you in a minute. In the US, we have been very heavily focused on the arena of literacy, because this has indeed been in the news a lot, but more importantly, we face in this country, in my view, still a crisis in literacy. We have 1/3 of kids not reading at grade level in the 3rd and 4th grades, which is that critical time when you go from learning to read to reading to learn. And the statistics are overwhelming that if the kids are not really reading at that age, they fall further and further behind, don't finish high school, fall into poverty. High school graduation being probably the greatest indicator of poverty alleviation that still exists in the country. So we feel we have a tremendous responsibility to build in a love of words, a love of learning. We've also learned that there's an enormous vocabulary gap between those from economically more advantaged neighborhoods versus those that are not. Thousands of words literally as a child enters into kindergarten, in difference between those from more economically advantaged neighborhoods. So we've launched a whole program with Sesame Street, and I'll talk a little bit about older kids in a minute. But Sesame Street is a word on the street, where we're having lots of celebrities like Conan O'Brien and Brian Williams and Rachel Ray and all kinds of people doing these word on the street things on the show that we've now put into podcasts. And last year we were the #1 podcast in the United States for 3 weeks, believe it or not, which tells you something about the United States, but it also it tells you something. And you can go on Apple now, on iTunes, and they're all free, and they're really quite wonderful. I'm biased, but they're pretty cool. So we're trying to use other technologies to make that happen as a way to promote literacy skills. We're also focused, for instance, on health as a program. The country, as you know, has a major challenge in dealing with childhood obesity. And what we did is we created sort of an all-consuming touch-point strategy on trying to work with HHS and the Center for Disease Control and others to come up with strategies to try to build in prevention as opposed to intervention when it might be too late. And this is the first generation of children who are expected to live less long than their parents, actually. So we build programs in terms of content. We've got the live show. We have a traveling body exhibit, which is, I know, come through LA. It was in Santa Ana and Orange County for several months. And a number of other shows. And we even made Cookie Monster deal with his cookie issues. And we had to teach him that cookies were a sometimes food, not an everyday food. And we were accused on Saturday Night Live, this is true, of trying to make him the Pilates monster. But not true. But we actually love that because it means that we're connecting with people in the culture. And we know that a mom in Compton is telling her daughter or her son, you know, even Cookie Monster can't eat cookies all the time. And it's a way, actually, of trying to get tools to give parents tools to make a difference and help them cope with these tough-to-teach topics. This is one that I'm especially committed to. It actually came from, I was in LA, well, I guess in LA you have the chance to do this now, but in New York, there's many people who commute by train into work. So one day I'm taking the train in and I'm reading the New York Times and there's a front page story about how a soldier who's fighting in Afghanistan is having his mortgage called in by a bank and his wife and kids have been kicked out of their house. And I was so enraged by this article that I came in and said, we got to do something about these families, let's find out how many kids there are. So it turns out there's 700,000 preschool kids of active duty military and Guard and Reserves whose parents are deployed, being redeployed, going through homecoming, coming back, some 30% of whom are coming back with injuries, either physical injuries or so-called invisible injuries. It's a huge issue for these families dealing with the stresses. There's a couple seats over here, by the way. A couple stresses and traumas that they're trying to deal with. And it doesn't matter if you believe in the war effort going on or you don't. This is about children who really have been born into a situation where their parents are leaving and they're dealing with these very tough issues. So actually on the 29th of April, we're going to be launching in Arlington, Virginia, a brand new project which is dealing with soldiers coming back from injury. And I'm telling you, this is incredibly powerful stuff. We brought in soldiers who had returned and people from Walter Reed Hospital and other places who are trying to treat these kids to deal with the stresses and traumas that they are experiencing and how to talk to their own children about the issues when mom or dad come back so-called different. So I wanted to show you a little tape of what Talk, Listen, Connect looks like to get you a feel of how we're using the Muppet characters and live action films to make these come powerfully true.
Wow.
Yes, it is Thursday, but it's also that day we talked about. Remember, the day I have to go?
Oh, yeah. Daddy's gotta go away for lots and lots of days, right?
That's right, son.
No. Oh, get out! You gotta go with Daddy?
Well, I sure wish you could, son, but Daddy's gotta go do grown-up work. I need to go help some people. It's a very important job, and well, it's just something I have to do.
How does your Daddy help you get ready when they go away? Before my daddy goes away, we play together a lot. And when he's gone, Mom makes an X on the calendar for each day. And I keep busy. Helping out with dinner, brushing my teeth. Good job. I'm so proud of you. Mom reads the same books to me at night that Daddy reads me.
I'm active duty Air Force. I've been in 8 years. I'm a single parent. My son died in Nancy. And being deployed does have its challenges, but I do have a great support system.
I know.
Good Daddy. Good night, Moon.
I'm Cuba Gooding, and I'm on one of the most famous streets in the world, Sesame Street. For generations, we have provided support for children in a variety of situations. Recently, we extended a hand to military parents and their families. Parents deployed entire families, a situation that requires equal parts of courage and sacrifice. Please, join me now for a different walk on this very familiar street to discover real stories of real people surviving and serving our country.
We're not the only military family in this. It's a whole family of people that does this. And part of the larger picture.
One of the things I did before I left, went on the computer, printed up some notes for them on colored paper, and put them into a large jar, so that every day before they left for work or school, they would pour a note out of the jar, or bath, and read that from the note they needed.
I can't wait till I'm hungry.
Happy birthday.
Make you feel like I was there. I want to do what you do school.
I think when it actually gets older, realizes what I did and why I have to be so proud of my service in the military.
So, as you can see, we've been somewhat overwhelmed by the response from the military. Can you guys hear this stuff in the back?
Yeah.
Okay. It's been, we did 400,000 of these kids. They're completely gobbled up. We stream them on the web, part of their own military one source. And, the idea is that parents can watch this with their kids and then talk about it. It breaks the silence and helps kids deal with these kinds of tough issues that they're facing with as a family. Similarly, after 9/11, we did, in the shadow of Ground Zero, we actually did a project called You Can Ask that was done in English, Spanish, and Mandarin because Chinatown is in the shadow of the World Trade Center. That allowed kids to talk about their feelings because we found there was a ton of residual stress and trauma that kids were experiencing even years after the disaster. And these programs have been incredibly successful and have been part of really dealing with these kinds of emergency preparedness issues as we work in this country and frankly around the world. And you can apply this kind of technology and approach to natural disasters or to, God forbid, man-made disasters and things that have happened. So we use it really as a tool to try to help kids get through these tough situations. We have become probably something for a quintessential American program that nobody would have ever realized. In over 140 countries around the world now, Sesame Street has expanded to work in what is commonly referred to, I guess the lecture's named Muppet Diplomacy. And in about 30 of these countries, we have done local adaptations. So this is not the US show simply being dumped into Germany or into Indonesia. It is in fact a locally indigenous show that is produced in Jakarta, in Hamburg, in Cairo, in Johannesburg, in Mexico City, which has the local feeling, the local accents, the local humor, the local educational needs to build an indigenous program that are trying to use the techniques of Sesame Street and promote local educational objectives. So I want to tell you about some of these and how we approach them. These are the Millennium Development Goals. I think you'll probably recognize these, by the way, that were signed pretty much by every country in the world, including the United States, right? Back in 2000. These are common goals that are really impacting children especially. And the workshop is involved in, not all of these directly, but certainly in those about universal primary education, gender equality, combating HIV and AIDS, etc. And we've done a lot of work in these arenas to try to get partners who share these values that we can use the power of television to try to promote things. So we go to a place like Bangladesh, and the United States Agency for International Development has been a wonderful partner and also spurring some private sector support now in Bangladesh from the big cell phone provider there to create a program where only 20% have access to preschool education. As you can see, there's one television station, BTV, that reaches a huge number of children, and where those children are not being reached, we actually have outreach programs with organizations like Save the Children, where they literally go out on rickshaws into rural villages, and we have communal screenings of the show in front of thousands of kids. I mean, you can't believe in this day and age this is going on, but it's really something to behold. We're also promoting a major impact, just as we did in the U.S. around dealing with race relations. We have focused on the respect and understanding curriculum and have worked now throughout the Middle East, which probably is worth a whole lecture separately in and of itself. There's a long history here. But we actually built an Israeli-Palestinian Co-Production back in the 90s after the Oslo Accords, when the peace in two neighboring states was a little more on the horizon there. We created Israeli Muppets, Palestinian Muppets. It was co-produced. The Muppets could not speak to each other in the same language, but they connected over falafel and hummus, right? Or a common dislike of onions. And it was a way to humanize the other side, which is really what Sesame Street has always done under kind of the rubric of we are different, but we are in fact the same. So we had raised all the money, including from the European Union, who don't give Americans money too often, to create a new show, and we brought the Jordanians in as well, because Queen Noor at the time was a huge fan, and thank goodness that Queen Rania today is a huge fan. But we had built that, raised the money, we were going forward, and the Intifada broke out in 2000, and we had to kind of scramble and figure out what to do, and what we ended up creating were 3 parallel programs in Israel, in the West Bank in Ramallah with Al-Quds University, and in Jordan with Jordanian television. And in Israel, we're on Hop TV, which is actually the #1 cable channel in all of Israel as of last month, which is kind of amazing. And we created these local characters. Rosh and Noach are sort of Bert and Ernie of Israel now. And if you ever get caught traveling to Israel and you're at the airport, tell them you know Rosh and Noah, you'll get through security. I've used it. So anyway, I've also bribed Kremlin guards with Big Bird plush, you know, that works. So we've been working in Kosovo, which is a deeply divided state, which just probably declared independence recently, although the Serbs in Serbia are certainly protesting that now. These are deeply divided ethnic groups that have divisions that are just, they're very thick. And when you walk down the streets of Pristina on Bill Clinton Boulevard, and you haven't lived till you've had coffee at the Cafe Hillary on Bill Clinton, as I have. I'm not making this up. You can humanize the other side by showing a Serbian child in the privacy of her own living room that there's an Albanian child who actually gets up in the morning, brushes her teeth, goes to school, goes to church, you know, or the mosque, goes, you know, comes home, has dinner, has festivals that they celebrate, and you begin, well, my goodness, deep down underneath, that child's got to be saying that child is not so different from I am, because it's much harder to hate someone when you know someone on the other side, and you can humanize these conflicts a little bit more and try to break down some of what they're about. And I'm very proud of this one, which we just launched in Belfast 2 weeks ago, which is a Northern Irish Sesame Street that I've been working on for 5 years with the BBC finally coming in as a partner. And this is trying to deal with the sectarianism between Catholics and Protestants that's been going on for decades. It left thousands of people dead and injured, and a very bloody conflict that I'm sure the people in this room know more than I do on. But we were able to work on this under sort of a similar rubric of humanizing the other side and trying to build an optimistic shared future. And I have to tell you, I was over there just literally 2 weeks ago with Martin McGuinness, who was the head of the IRA, sitting next to me, watching Sesame Street, okay? And he gets up afterwards and he says, did you hear the one about the 82-year-old Ulster Unionist and the 57-year-old Irish Republican who are sharing power at Stormont just like the Muppets on Sesame Street? And I called my board chairman, I said, you know, I'm going to quit now because it doesn't get any better than this. But that was really what this is about. And what it's also about is visiting that integrated school in Belfast, of which there's not many. There's only about 7% of the schools are integrated, and what they mean by integration is Catholic and Protestant, okay? Which you can't obviously tell people on the surface because they all look sort of the same. So a new girl comes into the classroom the day we're there who's 4 years old. She's a new kid coming into the school, and a little girl comes up to her and says, what's your name? She says, Mona. She looks at her and says, what are you? So trying to figure it out. So the girl says, I'm Muslim. And this little girl steps back, very confused, and says, are you a Catholic Muslim or a Protestant? So it was, but what it shows you is that you're dealing with an innocence that is handed down. And there's been research by some of our partners like Paul Connolly at Queen's University in Belfast that shows children as young as 3 years old are holding these deep prejudices about other religious or ethnic groups. And I'm sure if this research was replicated in other arenas, in Rwanda, in the Balkans, in the Middle East, you would have a similar sort of thing. And of course, in this country, on issues around race relations, I'm sure there's been similar kinds of conclusions as well. So I want to show you a little bit of how we're embracing this respect and tolerance curriculum around the world.
دلوقتي اقدر ابدا الصلاه على السجاده وفي اتجاه القبله.
Very nice. Very nice. So, wait. There's we can't go without her. We can't go without her. Kemi. What's that so kind of stupid? What's that? I don't want to play. Because the other children at school don't want to play with me because I'm HIV positive. But they say they don't want to touch me because they think I will make them sick. Oh, but Ken, we all know you can't get HIV just by touching someone or by being friends with them. Kenny, we are not scared to play with you because we know that we cannot get HIV just by being your friend. And I have much more fun when I play with my friends. What's that again? Okay. Now is everyone on the train? Yeah. Very nice. Very nice.
一天早晨，我跟村里的小朋友们一起去上学。在学校里，我们上藏文课，也上汉文课。课间休息，我跟同学们跳舞、玩游戏。
Personas buenas que tienen animales de bella lana que se usa para tejer preciosos tapices, un pueblo que tiene un río con agua pura
לכל אחד נכין שעון בשפה שלו. שעון שמתאים לאנשים בעיר שלנו עכו, שיש בה יהודים, ערבים, מוסלמים וערבים נוצרים.
Not being blinded by a color, accepting one another, like different letters in the alphabet need each other. We are being friends. Friendship, love like friendship. Ooey gooey friendship, love like friendship. Love like.
So that gives you a little taste about what Sesame is doing in different countries. You can see girls' education. We deal with HIV/AIDS by dealing with stigma. Where 1 in 9 kids are infected, and a great sort of chill about talking about HIV and AIDS. This gives kids the ability to think about that you can play with someone and be their friends and not necessarily get sick. There's some wonderful live-action pieces about a child who's HIV positive who gets cut and what to do in case that happens, and you run and find an adult and have it properly bandaged and then can go out and play. But it's a way of using the power of media to make those different things happen. And I talked about evaluating impact, and just as an idea, a couple of recent impact statements that we've gotten back from Bangladesh are really encouraging. The kids exposed to the show were a year ahead of kids not exposed to the show in terms of literacy skills, which is a remarkable undertaking, I think, and done not by the workshop, by the way, by independent auditors who have come in and looked at this. And as well in Kosovo, 74% were more likely in this control group who watched the show versus who didn't to demonstrate positive attitudes towards kids from different ethnic backgrounds. This speaks to the power of media. And we can argue whether it's a good thing or not that television and other media have this magnetic appeal to kids, and its transformational way in which it has impacted our societies in this country and around the world, but we know that it happens. And just as Joe and Cooney launched the workshop under that belief in 1969, we now can apply this to Bangladesh, Kosovo, and other places that have similar kinds of appeals. On health, this is an example of some of the things that we're doing around the world. So we've been able to deal in arenas. I mean, you never thought that you'd see Sesame Street dealing with issues around medical regimens and immunizations, but in fact, that's exactly what we're doing, because global health partners have seen the ability to use the Muppets to promote these kinds of healthy habits, and we've been able to go out and do that. We use outreach materials to go along with the video, so it's not simply a television show that goes up and disappears, but in fact a lot of print materials. We've used radio, and even in the bush in South Africa where there's a lack of electricity, we have these wind-up radios that you've probably seen, some of you have worked in developing countries, that we've worked with something called the Free Play Foundation out of London, which is funded by Vodafone, and they were able to you wind up these radios and you can listen to Playtime with Cammy, who's that South African Muppet, every week on the SABC, which is the major broadcaster in South Africa. I just wanted to share a few of these pictures to show you that I'm not totally pulling your leg. This is a scene in South Africa where we have a traveling show of the Muppets dealing with issues around health, and they have live performers of Cammy coming on, and you can see the crowd of literally thousands of kids who show up in these rural areas to make this happen. And this is an example of the rickshaws in Bangladesh that Save the Children has worked with us on. And then finally in India, where there are 160 million children under the age of 6. Try that one on. That would make it the 4th largest country in the world with everyone as a 5-year-old. Wow. We're working in the slums in Delhi and in Mumbai with help from the Michael and Susan Dell Foundation on these traveling vans which are going around and having community settings. And it features this little girl named Chunky who is a role model for young girls, because most girls drop out of school in India by year 2. This is a statistic which I had heard recently, which boggled my mind, that there are more children out of school in India than the entire rest of the world combined. So we all think of India now as, you know, as this huge superpower, which it is becoming technologically and economically, but there is still an enormous population in need in that country. And Sesame, I think, can play a little role in helping those kids reach their greatest potential. I want to show you a couple of global health initiatives, and then I'll wrap it up and answer some questions. Watching twice helps impact.
Because the other children at school don't want to play with me because I'm HIV positive. But you mean, they say they don't want to touch me because they think I will make them sick.
Oh, but Ken, we all know you can't get HIV just by touching someone or by being friends with them.
Maybe we should go and tell the children at your school that they cannot get HIV by touching
think you can see that we are engaging in our own way of diplomacy, I guess, by using media to help children reach their highest potential. It is a way in which we've taken the lessons we've learned in the United States, expanded those beyond literacy and numeracy and basic cognitive learning to social and emotional and health lessons, and now in these 140 countries around the world trying to make a difference. There are about 700 million kids under the age of 10 who have access to television, as we understand. We have research who are counting each and every one of them. And we're reaching about 90 million of them. So we feel there's a lot more to go. And we're 350 people in New York who are very dedicated to this mission. And we're very proud of our association with the Annenberg School and the CPD, because I think we both believe in a common mission, which is trying to use the power of people to connect people, to resolve differences around the world peacefully. And I hope you have enjoyed our little walk down the longest street in the world. So thanks again.
Gary, that was truly breathtaking. Thank you so much for that. This clock, I should say, is wrong. We have less than 10 minutes, and so if you could just introduce yourself to Gary and ask a short question, we'll try and get in as many as we can. So would you like to go first?
My name's Lana, I'm the second year master's student. I was wondering if when you're dealing with stigma issues or conflict resolution, if you've had a backlash from audiences because you mistreated an issue or didn't foresee someone interpreting the message.
Yeah. Well, did everyone hear the question? It's a really good question. The key to this is localization. So if it's not us getting beaten up, it'll be our local advisors who are telling us really of the touch points. For instance, I'll give you a good example. We're in Kosovo. We actually brought together all of the UNICEF offices throughout the Balkans. We brought them in from Serbia, from Albania, from Bosnia, from Macedonia, they all came in. I'm leaving some of that. Croatia. So they all came in, and we said, well, why don't we let's do a Balkan Sesame Street and connect all these groups. And they said, no, that will not work. That's like recreating Tito's Yugoslavia. People will not work. And we would have walked in with a different set of lenses, but I think the fact that they're able to see through these kinds of political nuances helps us. And we're dealing with the Palestinians. We have a wonderful educational advisor there named Dr. One of the great names of all time, Dr. Cairo Arafat. She's amazing. And she has just given us wonderful advice about what to promote. We're doing a big effort with boys role modeling on the West Bank right now because it's such a huge problem there. The boys just don't have role models to have positive inspiration. So it's really about having localized partners who can cut through those issues.
Thank you very much. I think Anne Sherman, you were next.
Hi, Anne Sherman, in residence here. Thank you for that very inspiring presentation. My question is similar to Lana's in that it's a question about how you monitor and deal with quality control to make sure that the principles that the workshop has set up are followed. And I think, back to the Palestinian, I think of the example of, wasn't there a case where Hamas kind of co-opted the sort of Muppet idea and turned it into something that was quite negative, and then they finally went away. But it must be an issue for you to with so many different programs around the world, to make sure that they follow the principles that you.
Well, first of all, you got to pick your partners and who have to embrace your values. And what we do is we bring them over to the U.S. and give them this, what we call the Sesame Bath. So they have to actually go through quite a rigorous program of training. So we train the writers. We train puppeteers, we train directors, we bring them to the U.S. show and show them how we do it. And now we actually had Bangladeshis who were trained by South Africans because the Bangladesh producers couldn't get visas to the U.S. to come in. And this is, of course, wonderful because AID is funding the show and the State Department's not giving them visas to come over to produce the show. So Okay, another issue of public diplomacy. But anyway, we dealt with that issue. You know, on the Hamas question, this is an old issue because obviously people who have not so good intentions have found ways to use technology, as we all know, as you actually know, having a whole lab which is focused on learning about what's going on the web in terms of political messaging around the world. And as we learned on 9/11, in a terrible way, technology was used to promote violence and destruction. So there are going to be people who do that. The incident that you're talking about actually began to occur after the Palestinian Sesame, the real Sesame Street launched, and there was a program on that had a Mickey Mouse knockoff. Thank God it wasn't Big Bird. It had a Mickey Mouse knockoff that was promoting death and destruction to the Zionists and all this other stuff, and the goal in life should become a martyr and da-da-da. And of course, Prime Minister Netanyahu at the time went on national television in Israel to attack the Palestinian Sesame Street, which we then had to go back and say, it's not Sesame Street. We actually had to make the Prime Minister go sort of publicly, which that was easy to do. So, and recently there's been another one. It did go away. But you know what, look, the thing is we've got to be, there are, I don't know how many of you are from the region in the Middle East. Is anyone from the Middle East? Okay. So, and being from, if you travel to the West Bank, and I'm not trying to be political about this, but when you're on the other side of that wall, it's a very depressing place with very limited opportunity. And people are, there's a lot of unemployment, people are unable to move from place to place. Guess what they're doing? They're watching television, and lots of it, in their living rooms because there's not much else to do. And what are they watching? So you can fill in the blanks. And if we're not presenting programs which inspire and build a learning society to resolve conflicts, to move forward and be aspirational professionally, to take advantage of those opportunities that are there, I think we're going to miss a big opportunity, certainly in public diplomacy, but also it helps the interests of our own country and value itself. So I think we're trying to work on that premise to promote that positive society.
Very good. Let's see if we can take a couple more questions. We'll take one in the corner. Yes, please introduce yourself.
My name is Stephanie. I'm a first-year public diplomacy student. My question is, how are you able to evaluate the effectiveness of your health campaigns and the different strategies that you're putting out there for kids to take away?
Yeah, there was a slide I was going to show, which I skipped over because I was running out of time. But I think two ways. There's a quantitative test, which we can, the good news about television is that you can test ratings a lot in most places. Like in Egypt, Alam Simsim, our show, is the #1 rated kids show in Egypt now. 5:30 Channel 2, you can ask any Egyptian cab driver in New York. And then qualitatively, we will work with the University of Witwatersrand in Johannesburg or Johns Hopkins University or someone to go in and do a study on the effectiveness of the immunization program or the malaria to see whether kids are getting the messages, whether there's been an increase in bed nets. And you've got to create a scientific, based protocol like you would on campus here, kids exposed versus kids not exposed, and see if there are behavioral shifts that happen. And we are becoming better at that. We've always done it from the beginning. It's the hardest stuff to fund. Every foundation wants to have this, and nobody wants to fund it. So evaluative research is a critical part of what we're trying to do. And we love to actually work with CPD to figure out some ways to come up with new metrics to do some of the evaluation. Let me just say one thing. I'll take one last question. But my colleague, Dr. Michael Levine, Wade Hyatt, is in the back. Michael is running something quite wonderful. He joined us from the Asia Society this year, running something called the Joan Gans Cooney Center, which is focusing on the needs of 6 to 9-year-olds and their interest in new media, including video games, the web, and other kinds of game players. to promote literacy strategies, to tackle this kind of vast wasteland of only entertainment product for 6 to 9-year-olds and not much educational curriculum-based product. So we're working with a lot of education schools, but not just them, but game developers like EA and others, to bring an interesting consortium of folks together. And Michael will hang around afterwards if you want to talk. I just want to give a plug to the center as we go forward. We hope USC will be a major partner of that effort as well. I know you're going over the engineering school tomorrow.
We're already working with the film school.
Right, the film school.
Very good. I think, Mark, you were next.
Mark Naylor, also a first-year public diplomacy student. How do you all see your Americanness? You alluded to working with the government. Are you supporting their public diplomacy mission? When you're going abroad, is it an American issue? How do you deal with that?
Well, it's a really great question. Next question? No. It's a great question, and here's my take on it. We get into some really interesting situations. First of all, as an American, we're very proud of our work, and we believe that what we're exporting is the best of America, which is about education, and it's about creativity and open-mindedness. And we think that that's what this country stands for, and that's what we're promoting around the world. And I can tell you that I can walk into meetings in Riyadh, in Amman. I mean, I will tell you this story. I was in Gaza. This is the God's honest truth. Right after the Israelis left, and we go into Gaza, which is not a nice place. There's a Uzi submachine gun sitting next to me, unlike Hillary Clinton. No, I'm kidding. And we're going down the road, and we get to the Palestinian Authority headquarters, and there's barbed wire and 12-foot high walls and the whole thing. We go through these checkpoints. We get in there. This big burly guy comes out as the minister's bodyguard. He looks at me. He goes, "So how are my friends Bertha and Ernie?" I learned about them when I was in exile in San Diego. You can't make it up, right? So America's exporting, you know, probably Hollywood exports more to the world from a, diplomacy point of view, good or bad, than any other thing. I mean, it's a huge export for this country. It shapes the hearts and minds of people around the world about their image of the United States also. And we take that role really, really seriously. We get into interesting situations in Indonesia. The Secretary Rice's office calls us on a Friday. Oh, the Secretary is going to be in Jakarta. She wants to announce a grant to you guys at a madras on Sunday night or Monday morning. It's like, I don't know if you know, from New York to get to Jakarta, it's not Hoboken. So we said, well, we don't know if we can do it, and besides, you guys know that this is really an Indonesian show, and we, of course, want her to, be proud of that, but it's an Indonesian show. They have to own it. They have to be funded. So the next thing we know is someone over there at the embassy hires a knockoff Elmo costume. And there's a picture in the New York Times with Secretary Rice and Elmo waving an American flag and a madras in Jakarta, which wasn't exactly the message that we were trying to promote at the time. So this was also great because the State Department was promoting intellectual piracy, which was good. So anyway, but we love them. They're great. And I know you're my taxpayer money too. But we've been proud to be your partners.
Can we just sneak in one last question?
Yeah, sure.
Let me negotiate a couple of extra minutes.
Yes, sir.
When I was growing up, there was no Sesame Street, no television. But my children, if I have a 30 seconds, my children and my grew up with a Sesame Street. My grandchildren is growing up with a Sesame Street. So I always meet someone from the Sesame Street and then in a person I couldn't never meet. So here this is the first time I meet you. So I say sincerely thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. My question
I don't
is.
have fur either.
My question to is, I like Sesame Street theme: talk, listen, connect.
Yes.
Now, don't you think all the world political leaders should watch Sesame Street and then talk, listen, and connect, and then we'll have a peace?
I could not end this better myself.
Thank you very much, everyone, and Gary will be here in a few minutes.